Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this very important and timely hearing. Millions of our fellow Americans are suffering right now in their quality of life and their ability to interact with their jobs and their families as a consequence of a lack of resilience to these foreign cyber threats. And General, I wanted to ask you, in circumstances where this opaqueness exists that Ranking Member Gallagher referenced regarding the connections between malicious cyber actors and state actors, how should we think about the concept of deterrence and our capability to deter against some of these more asymmetric threats?
Congressman, I think that in terms of thinking about deterrence, it really is thinking about how do we impose costs, and that's the way that we have approached it at U.S. Cyber Command within the department. In terms of operating outside the United States, when we see elements that are operating, how do we try to impose the largest cost possible? Whether or not that's through being able to expose them, whether or not that's being able to share the information with a series of partners that we have, or whether or not when authorized to conduct operations against them.
Can our fellow Americans who are dealing with the impact of this last cyber attack assume that the imposition of some cost is what's being contemplated by the Department of Defense now?
So while I won't get into obviously any of the operations that are being considered, what I would say is that my role as the Commander of U.S. Cyber Command is to provide a series of operational opportunities or courses of action for the Secretary and the President to consider.
I want to again delineate the types of options that we'd like to task you to develop as they relate to state actors versus non-state actors. I understand that with governments, exposure and embarrassment can be a high cost. Do you agree that with more asymmetric threats, the costs have to be more direct and economic and kinetic?
Congressman, what I would say is my experience is that the type of threats that you had described that are non-state in nature, our response has to be persistent, that it can't be a one-time effort. It has to be persistently that we are going to enable our partners and to act when authorized.
I also want to associate myself with the comments of the ranking member of the full committee regarding the workforce and recruitment. We all know why you have retention problems. It is because the private sector pays multiples what we would be able to pay people. And while pay certainly isn't the only thing that motivates folks, it certainly can contribute to a lack of retention of some of this high-end talent. It used to be the case, not too long ago, that the brightest minds in Silicon Valley were working on cyber and munitions and labor and lasers, and the Department of Defense was the most important customer and often the most important investor. And now I'm concerned that the brightest minds in America are working on likes and shares and memes and other activities that don't directly connect to the mission of the department. And so I think it's essentially critical for us to follow the thread that Ranking Member Rogers laid out to actually develop more of that pipeline earlier, understanding that there will be some attrition. But a digital service academy seems to be an inspirational, patriotic, nationalist thing for us to be able to do. I think it would inspire a great deal of confidence both in the public and the private sector. Is there any advice you would give us going forward to perhaps flesh out that idea from Ranking Member Rogers?
So I think I couldn't agree more in terms of just the spirit of what both you and Congressman Rogers has described with regards to opportunities future for talent. I would only add what we have to do collectively as obviously the department and the government is to make it as easy as possible for people to go from the private sector into the public sector. And I think we still have work to do there.
Yeah, I mean, I recall even from our first orientation the challenges presented by some of the limitations and exclusions that the department puts on people for decisions or recreation that they'd engaged in that then could disqualify them. And I would hope we would want to cast a wide net for high-quality talent that can make that contribution. And again, the earlier you get started with people, we get to nominate these great patriots to service academies now, and we see how in the 9th and 10th grade they're already making choices to try to earn those nominations and those disappointments. And so I think that building that pipeline sooner would certainly be very helpful. I thank the chairman, and I yield back.